whether you go in East Africa, West Africa, Southern Africa, you see that there's a need for fundamental change. We can all attest from the events that have just taken place on the continent now. But the challenge, however, is how to define the change that we want and how to go about it. I think that is where the African youth today is kind of confused, because when we talk about the change, some people would say that we want more jobs to be provided. And other people would think about the fundamental change in terms of we want elections. Others will want good leadership. So I thought it is maybe important to frame the change by, of course, by listening to or paying attention to all the sides and all the regions and all the voices that are coming up, championed by a lot of pan-Africanists around the continent, and then to frame that those messages into a blueprint of pan-Africanist revolution.
Hello and welcome to Self-Upgrade. Today I have a guest. It's a returning guest. Someone that I really enjoyed speaking to. I think it was about 2 months ago. We talked about his book, one of his books. And today he's back to introduce to us his new book. So I can't wait, to introduce this book to you, because I read it. I had the pleasure to read it. And to be honest with you, just before we started recording, I was basically telling him about how, I enjoyed reading the book. Because as I told him, after we lost, big names and big voices like Kwame Nkrumah, Lumumba, we feel like, when will we get people like that? People with, so much to say, so much, intelligence and so much wisdom that they can share with us, for us like to move the Pan-African agenda forward, But when I read his book, the book that we're going to talk about today, I felt like, these people are maybe gone, but their spirit is definitely lingering, around us, because we have, this new generation of authors who basically, have a voice and so much to share, and, so much to tell us in terms of, what we can do to develop our continent. What can we do basically to get Africa out of the maze that, that we are in today? So, first of all, before we move on, please help me to welcome Kabala to the Self-Upgrade podcast. Hello, Kabala. How are you today?
Hello, Queen. I'm doing well. And greetings to your listeners, to your audience worldwide. I'm doing very well, and I'm happy to be once again on your program. And I'm thankful to all Africans who will be listening or following us on this program. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, thank you for being here, to share so much wisdom, like I was saying, with us. Because as this podcast is unfolding, you are going to see all the wisdom that Kabala has to share, and I was telling him, like, we need to push this book to more people, because more people have to see this, So basically, Kabala, before we move on, obviously, this is not the first time that you were here. So I'm sure that some people may have seen, the first episode. But can you just quickly tell us about yourself, please?
Yes, thank you. So my name is Kabala, as I said before. So I was born in the Democratic Republic of Congo. As a revolutionary, I call it a colonial enclosure. So I am currently more residing in South Africa. I am an engineer by profession. I am also a community development expert, of course, by profession. And I'm also currently pursuing further studies in development studies. That's much I can say about myself. I'm author of 4 books right now. The one we are talking about today is my 4th one. And I'm an entrepreneur. Yeah, pretty much that's what I can say. Thank you.
That's amazing. And I just realized that we are talking about the book, but we didn't mention the title of the book. So I'm just going to, so the book, the book that we're talking about here, I will put a picture of the cover of the book anyway. But the book, the new book that Kabala is here to introduce us to, is entitled "Only Revolutionaries Should Read This. Others Will Be Confused." So that's, this title says it all. Like, it's definitely for revolutionaries and for people who resonate with the Pan-African agenda. Because if you don't, reading this book, you'll be like, what is he talking about? What is this all about? It may sound utopic, or I'm not sure. But once you are in a Pan-African, sphere, this book is like a Bible, to be honest with you. So as I was saying, Kwame Nkrumah, Conscientism, for those of you who read it, it's a book that may be complicated, like to understand the first time, but once you understand the essence of the book, you are like, wow, it's mind blowing. So it's the same thing that, I felt when reading this very book that we're talking about today. It's really profound, but the way that Kabala, wrote the book, he wrote it in a way that makes it accessible to anyone. You don't have to be a genius. You don't have to know Latin or I don't know what, or philosophy. I will say it's a philosophical book. That's how I felt, lots of philosophy, but at the same time, it remains really accessible to anyone. And Kabbalah, did you want this book to be so?
Yes, yes, definitely. I believe that the struggle today is the struggle of the masses. Even the Pan-African agenda itself has to be the agenda of the people, of the masses. So it is not supposed to be framed in a way that it sounds distant from the masses or remote from most of the people who are concerned about this struggle, and most importantly, people who need liberation and emancipation, who are the masses of African people. It is in that manner that I thought it has to be written in a simple English, if I have to say that, or simple French that is accessible to all the people, so that it can really be profitable to most of our people. I think, as I said, I mean, it's based on the fundamental facts that today the struggle or Pan-Africanism, it's the agenda of the masses, so it has to be accessible and available to the masses. So it's not supposed to be really intellectualized. By using that word, I mean to be framed in a context and the words that are very strange to the people. So that was my aim, and being part of the masses, I think I need to speak to the masses in a language that people can easily and clearly understand.
Yeah, I mean, I felt it. I think you even mentioned it in the book that, the book was meant to be, accessible to be accessible to as many people as possible.
Definitely.
So I think that's definitely, a big plus. It's a big plus. Like anyone, can read the book and understand very clearly what the book is about. And I think this is a very good, it's a good transition basically to the question that I was about to ask you, like, to just summarize the book very quickly, to tell us what's the book about, what's, what is it about, and what is basically the aim of the book as well, please.
Yeah, so I've observed throughout the continent as well as in the diaspora, basically with the recent events in the Sahel, in Kenya, and other part of the continent, what I've realized is that there is a flame of revolution sweeping across the continent. It is said that Africa is majority young people, and it's clearly now visible that these young people are now awake and they want to change and a fundamental change on the continent. They are being awakened by a lot of issues on the continent. You're talking about poverty, unemployment, corruption, all these things. So basically, whether you go in East Africa, West Africa, Southern Africa, you see that there's a need for fundamental change, which we can all attest from the events that have just taken place on the continent now. But The challenge, however, is how to define the change that we want and how to go about it. I think that is where Africa is, I mean, the African youth today is kind of confused because when we talk about the change, some people would say that we want more jobs to be provided. And other people would think about the fundamental change in terms of we want elections. Others will want good leadership. So I thought it is maybe important to frame the change by, of course, by listening to or paying attention to all the sides and all the regions and all the voices that are coming up, championed by a lot of pan-Africanists around the continent, and then to frame that those messages into a blueprint of pan-Africanist revolution, and also to provide a guide into how we can go about achieving that revolutionary agenda for the African liberation. Of course, by starting with the definition of what is this revolution means. So, in a nutshell, I think the book is intended to. It was written for African young Africans who are aspiring to go into leadership position, whether in a business or in political area. And then just to provide that guideline for, because as you can see, the subtitle of the book is the guideline for Pan-African revolution, you know, Pan-African Revolution. Sorry, sometimes I'm getting confused myself. So the subtitle is A Manual for Revolutionary Leadership in Africa. Sorry. So I think that's actually explains the idea behind the writing of this book, is to provide a guideline for these aspiring leaders who want to change the continent, so that we don't get to the point where we get compromised or we don't know what we are pursuing. And by not knowing what we are pursuing, we may really get to the point where we get compromised and we change the goals, when faced with certain opportunities or challenges. The aim was just to provide this guideline, but of course, defining exactly what we are after as a revolution. What is this revolution means? Why do we want this revolution? What does it mean for Africa, and how can we go about achieving it? Of course, I have to agree that the book doesn't provide a detailed blueprint or guidelines on how we're going to go step by step to achieve this revolution, for the reason which the book has explained, because this is a scientific revolution, which means that you don't have to predict how everything will unfold. What you have to do is to have the goal, which is the vision that you are pursuing, and then begin to move step after step and examine yourself, examine the challenge that you are facing, and then, come up with other new strategies and new steps until you get to the point where we can even, we can look back and say, really, we have achieved something in terms of what we had in mind, which is the African revolution, African liberation, and African emancipation. So that's what I can say about the intention or the idea behind writing this book, is really for leaders to understand what it means, revolution, what it means, liberation for Africa, and how do we go about it.
Well, you know what? I think you are also being very humble. Humility is great, but to be honest with you, I've never seen such a document. I've never seen anything like this. Basically, you took the time to think about all the problems that, Africa is encountering. And you suggested basically ways that, how we can tackle basically those issues, those challenges. And once again, that's not something that I've ever seen before. I don't know. There may be some books like that, but for me as an African, this is the very, and I read, lots of books, and I've never seen this. I even think that the people who talk about African unity, most of the time they just sing it like that. African unity, African unity. And I love the fact that within the book, you did mention the fact that, when they talk about African unity, they bring, language as being the barrier to that unity. In Africa, we don't speak the same language, so unity is going to be difficult. What language are we going to use? And you said that, the language is just like, you can say, aesthetic. The main thing that we need to talk about are the political, like, how are we going to do this? And you suggested basically ways that we can achieve that unity. And once again, that's something that I've never seen before. We have politicians, we have leaders, but none of them ever came forward with something like what you put in, as what you did, in this book. So, with that, I'd like to ask you a question regarding something that, I think was very is very telling of what is happening in Africa. So you said that there are two forgotten truths about Africa. Can we talk about those truths? What are they?
Yeah, so beautiful. So I think I thought about it as a way of starting the book. I think it's actually on the first chapter of the book, just to kind of trigger a critical thinking in the minds of the people who are reading the book, or in other words, to provoke, a kind of, yes, as I said, a kind of a critical thinking in the mind of the readers. So I spoke about the two forgotten truths. And the first truth is what I called the God creators of Africa, or the God's creators of Africa. And the second truth is the truth about the African independence, right? Which we have gotten today, that we celebrate every single day. So that was to lay the ground as to how we have to begin the discussion, because any kind of reparation, any kind of solution that one brings must be based on the proper diagnosis that has been done, that really reveals what is the problem, what is the cause of the problem. Then you can come up with a solution to fix it. So the problem is that we have today a lot of people who are talking about solutions, but they don't really focus on the problem, on the issue, to understand exactly what is the issue and how it has been affecting us. And for me, as far as I'm concerned, I feel like the main truth, the main forgotten truth, one of them actually, that we have to talk about is the nature of our identity today as African people. That includes our countries, our names, our language. So when you look at all these things, you will realize that they were created and imposed on us by Europeans. So in other words, Europeans are the true gods, creators of the current Africa. I'm talking about the Congo, Nigeria, Burkina Faso. Let's remove Burkina Faso, right? Talking about South Africa, Nigeria, Congo, Kenya. All these countries were created at the Berlin Conference, and the language that we are using were imposed on us. Some of us, we use French or English names just to say that we are functioning within the realm or within the paradigm that was created by Europeans and imposed on us. So sometimes we see people going to church to pray for God to bless, I don't know, Nigeria, or to bless Congo. The South African national anthem, I think also the Zimbabwean, begins by saying, God bless Africa, or God bless Africa. So for me, I'm always asking myself, who is this God are we addressing our prayers to? Is it the God, I don't know, the divine, or is it the God in Europe? Because if it is the divine, I don't think that he recognized these things, because he never created them. They were created by people in Europe. So maybe we should address them. So it was just to trigger the discussion. And of course, I've laid down, the facts that have led me to consider the current Africa as the creation of white people. And these things, to be clear about this, these things are not just political, they are not just economic, they are also spiritual. The crisis that we are facing in Africa today it's also a spiritual crisis, because when people are able to give you the name, to give you an identity, actually, to define you, it is not just something that they do politically or economically to control you on that areas. They also do that at the spiritual level and to control you spiritually. And that's why once somebody is able to define you, to identify you, to give you the name, to give you the language as we have been given by Europeans, it is not just going to affect you politically or economically, but it also affects you spiritually. So we have to question the current Africa, which we have inherited, critically to understand how it affects us. And from then we are able to come up with the proper solutions, because it is contradictory for one to talk about being a pan-Africanist at the same time pledge his loyalty to these flags that were imposed on us, these fake nationalities that were given to us by our oppressors. So I think this was very important for me to begin the book with, as part of diagnosis of the crisis that we have in Africa today. And the second truth that I spoke about in the book is the fact that we celebrate every day the African independence. Congo celebrates independence in June of every year. Nigeria, Ghana, all these countries. But the point is, did we really obtain independence in the 60s, or was just a shift of coast, of running colonial projects? And from then I developed my understanding and my analysis of the current situation in Africa, which many people believe to be the independent Africa, but I believe it is still a colony, which is of course ran by black people. So precisely the independence of Africa was just the end of European white administrators on the continent, or I should say, was the end of white administration on the continent to be taken over by black administration. But the colony, its structures, its policies remain the same. And that's what we are still living under today. So there was nothing like independence. It was actually the running away from the coast of running, the colonies. When European countries realized that running colonies was becoming so expensive in a way that they had to pay civil servants, they had to pay soldiers, doctors, lawyers, and all these people who are part of the function of states. The cost of taking care of all these things, building new infrastructures, was becoming just very expensive for them to keep on, taking charge of that. So it was a strategic move for them to hand over the coast to Africans, but at the same time, they had to remain in a position where they continue to reap the benefits of the continent, or to take the most of what comes out of the continent. So that's a reality in which we are living today. So in nutshell, independence was not really independence, was firstly the end of white administration to be replaced by black administration. And secondly, it was the coast analysis, whereby Europeans didn't want to continue paying the cost of running colonies. They put black people to pay to take the charge of the coast by themselves, but Europeans have to keep on getting the benefits or taking the resources of the continent. And that's the reason why France was able to to continually get about 400 billion US dollars out of 14 countries that it was neo-colonizing, while the management and administration of these colonies were under the black people or black leadership. So that is actually the brief discussion about the two forgotten truths.
So yeah, I think it's a great summary, and I love the fact that you explained really well the reasons why basically they switched from having the colonies the way they were before, run by white people, to having a new system, the neo-colonial system, where you still have the colonies, but you don't have to manage them anymore. We have become basically Africa African countries have become self-governed colonies, basically. We think that, we have leaders of the states, they are looking after the people. But, the like you said, the sad truth is that they are still basically working with the colonizer, serving the colonizer instead of serving the citizen of the countries. And I wanted us to, you know, to dig a bit deeper on the concept that you highlighted in the book. So you said you talk a lot about African liberating revolution. So, and you mentioned that a few minutes ago, you said that the revolution has to be scientific. So can we spend just a bit of time explaining what you mean by this term, and also the scientific, side of it, aspect of it? Can you explain that, please?
Yes, so I've called the new revolution in the 21st century as the African Liberating Revolution. So by mentioning African Liberating Revolution is actually to clarify the targets of this revolution, because we have different concepts of revolution on the continent. There are people who, of course, they are revolutionary in minds, but what they are pursuing, some will, for example, in South Africa, you have a political party known as the EFF, the Economic Freedom Fighters. They are revolutionaries in thoughts and in speech, and what they are pursuing is just to have black people getting access to the economy of South Africa. As we know that since the end of the apartheid, white people are still controlling the economy of South Africa. You also have people in West Africa, I mean, all across the countries, all across the continent, right, pursuing different goals of revolution. For example, when you look in the Sahel region, you will see people like Kemi Seba. They are revolutionaries, and what they're talking about is to kick the French out of the continent. Mainly, that has been the main agenda since then. You have people like your Mapongas and others, mostly talking about cultural revolution, like how Africans have to go back to their culture, to practice their indigenous culture and stuff like that. Others, we talk about unity as the goal of revolution. So for me, I thought that the main goal of this revolution, if we have to consider all aspects of things, I should say aspect of the continent, we have to come to that conclusion that the aim of this revolution is liberation of Africa and African people. So that's how I've called it the liberating revolution. And I've called it a social and scientific revolution because it has to be done in a scientific manner, and that is in line with the definition that was given by Kwame Ture about pan-Africanism, when he said that pan-Africanism, it's all about uniting Africans globally for the total liberation of Africa through scientific means. So for me, I think for us to be able to liberate Africa properly, we have to use science. We don't have to use haphazard methods, but we have to use science. And by science or scientific, we mean a process whereby you have to properly inquire or to search knowledge that will guide you through the steps that you have to take in order to liberate yourself, because we are at the age where people want to follow other people to be liberated. People want charismatic leaders. People want strong leaders. Some even go to pray for Africa to be liberated, which I believe is a waste of time. There's no one who can liberate Africa, a single charismatic leader who can liberate Africa, because all of us African people globally, we are still living under the domination of neo-colonialism. And if one knew the route or the road to liberation, he would have liberated himself long time ago. So we have to consider this as a scientific revolution in a way that we'll have to search for the knowledge that we need and use that knowledge for practical strategies that will take us uh, to another level, and then we analyze ourselves again, we study again, we create new knowledge that would take us to another level until we get to where we are supposed to go. The main assumption, the fundamental assumption of modern science is that we don't know everything that we are supposed to know. And sometimes what we believe that we know today might happen to be false tomorrow in face of new evidence or new knowledge. So even us as African people right now, we don't really know what it will take to liberate Africa. And the reason why I'm saying that is because every time you come up with a strategy to liberate, the enemy also has a strategy to counter react to your strategy and to keep you under his domination. And that is reason why the United States and all these other countries spend billions of dollars uh, funding think tank groups to study the means and the ways that they can keep the African minds still neo-colonized, to keep African youth distracted with a lot of social media, contents, all this nonsense that we see on TikTok here and there. All these things are designed purposely to keep us distracted and not to focus on the true on the true agenda. And when we resist, we overcome that distraction, and we have leaders such as Ibrahim Traore, Muammar Gaddafi, who really want to practically change the situation. Then they are hit by sanctions, and if sanctions fail, it is actually coup d'etat. And if coup d'etat don't succeed, we're talking about actually the elimination of those particular leaders. And this has been happening on the continent over and over. We have the experience. So the point is that the African liberating revolution can be contextualized within what we can call the second order chaotic system. And I've explained this in the book, as of course explained by Yuval Noah, who is a Jewish author. A second order chaotic system is a system whereby you come with the predictions to do A, B, C, D in the next 24 hours, and the system reacts to your predictions, and your prediction may not go as you have predicted, or you have, of course, wished to see things going on. So, and we have examples all across the country, the continents, to explain this chaotic system. The first order chaotic system, unlike the second order, is a system which does not react to the predictions, such as your weather. For example, if the weather predicts that tomorrow there will be rain, there's 50% chance for rain. Most likely there will be rain, right? You can predict that tomorrow there will be, the sun will rise up, and definitely the sun will rise up tomorrow. It's going to be sunny. But if you say, for example, that tomorrow we are going to overthrow the government of Congo or of Nigeria, automatically the secret service of the government will put soldiers on the road, and your predictions may not happen. So this is how we need to consider the revolution. So every time we come up, we say, okay, you know what? Let's come up with the continental banking system to create the single currency for Africa. You must always expect that there will be something done on the side of your enemy to undermine your prediction or your preparation. So that's where the scientific means or scientific methods comes into play, because then you will have to stop at some point, realize the mistakes that you have done because of the reactions of your enemies, and then study your enemy carefully, understand how they operate, and understand how they've been able to undermine your plans, and then from there develop new strategies and new plans, and move other steps forward, and face another resistance, and then stop again, study, realize, and create new methods. And that's how we are supposed to be moving. So in other words, scientific revolution means is a fluid system. It's not a system that is written on concrete, that as we are going to do this and that, and then at the end of it, we'll see liberation. Is not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So if, for example, in the last century, we used March to make our voice audible and to convince leaders to change certain policies that we wanted, today we have to understand sometimes that marching means nothing today, right? If we have used unions in the last centuries to claim our rights as workers, for example, today we have to understand that the working space, the working environment is actually robotized. If I have to say, there's a robots, right, in the working environment today. So it's easy for you to be kicked out, to be replaced by robots. So we have to study the current conditions and come up with a new method of how we can continue to claim our rights. So it is just an example that I'm giving. And one typical example to this case is what happened in 1980, uh, which is known today as the Lagos Plan of Action for Development, where African head of states gathered in Nigeria, Lagos, to think on how we can change the continent and create some kind of self-reliance on the continent, on food, on economy, so forth and so on. So they came up with this blueprint called the Lagos Plan of Action. Immediately, 1 year after the Lagos Plan of Action, there was something else in the United States, which we know today as the Washington Consensus, whereby European countries, World Bank, IMF gathered to study how they can eventually keep their hand over African resources and African in general. And they developed what we know today is the, of course, Washington Consensus, which is the kind of a precursor to what is known as neoliberalism, or structural adjustment programs that have been used by the World Bank and IMF to deepen the crisis of Africa, as we have come to know. So it means every time you invent a solution, there is a counter solution to your invention by your enemy. So we have to understand that the best way for us to progress is to allow our people to capture this revolution, to make mistakes, to learn from our mistakes, to reinvent new solutions, to keep on moving. But the objective must not be changed, because the objective is the total liberation and emancipation of Africa. But the way we have to go about it, it's something that we don't know exactly right now, because we can begin with the step A and they get compromised. They will have to jump step B to go to step C or step D, so forth and so on. And that's how we are going to manage to succeed in this revolution. So I think this is just a brief explanation, but in the book, I've given more analysis to make sense to why this must be a scientific revolution. Maybe to conclude, I think also another aspect of scientific revolution is to seek knowledge. And if we have to take that knowledge, by all means necessary, we have to do that. And we've seen that the People's Republic of China have been doing that. They have been actually finding a ways to attract knowledge from all around the world. Everywhere they see that there's a knowledge, they capture that person, they bring that person to China to contribute to the Chinese development. The US have done it. But when it comes to Africa, you will see that Africa is now rigged by xenophobia attacks, where we have hatred among ourselves. We don't see what light other people can bring to our countries. Once we don't carry the same passport, we don't speak the same language, we don't have the same names, automatically we begin to treat each other as enemies. And this is what we see, for example, in South Africa. We see this in other parts of the continent, and this is not going to allow us to develop. So I think Africa has to intentionally embark on that process of attracting or stealing knowledge from whatever it is. You know, if we see that there's a brilliant knowledge somewhere, we have to use whatever means that we can to attract that knowledge to come to Africa and contribute. As Marcus Garvey said, that great minds do not know boundaries. You know, a great mind does not know physical boundary, racial boundary, or whatsoever. Because if it is a great mind, anybody who embraces it will have to enhance their lives. You know, will have to enhance their lives and create the proper conditions for for their lives. So it doesn't matter. We don't know who. It doesn't matter for me to know actually who invented for example, the formula of a gravitational force, for example. I don't have to know his race. I don't have to know his ethnicity. But the only thing that I know is that if I use the formula, the gravitational force formula, I can apply it to certain things that I do and change my situation, change my reality. it depends on which domain I'm working. So this is the significance of great minds. So we also need to look at the things from this perspective to make sure that before the end of this century, Africa is self-reliant and Africa is capable to speak loudly in the world, and the world will listen. So that's actually all about the scientific, nature of this revolution.
Oh, I think you really beautifully explained it. Obviously in the book there's more. There's more to it, and you will see that he provides lots of examples. And once again, it's really a deep book. For people who wants to see things like action in Africa. Basically, once again, our leaders seem to be pointless, but it's not the case of our youth. Like, when you read this book by Kabala, you are like, so how come the leaders don't take this blueprint and make, the unity happen and make Africa develop? Because, that's what we need, actions. We need action, not just talk, nice speech to show that you speak a good French or you speak good English. We don't care. Even if you speak Swahili, or whatever you speak, you can speak your native language. But as long as you come with action and with good ideas, that's what we see in Burkina Faso with our brother Traore. That's why the whole continent is behind him, is with him, because we see action. That's all and like you said, with the scientific approach, there's no right or wrong. It's just about moving. Let's move. And if the whatever way or path we took is not the right one, we can always change it.
Yes.
Find a way, like why it's not the right path. And that actually will, those lessons that we would have learned through all the mistakes that we will that will be made, will actually help us to see what is the right path.
Yes.
You see, so making mistakes, if we make mistakes, it doesn't mean that we are doomed. No, it just means that we learned something new. So I like that, that flexibility basically the scientific approach gives. So I definitely also believe that that's the way forward. Just taking a path that we believe is the right one for Africa. And if it happens to have challenges, we can always study, analyze the challenges, and find basically what is not working and make it work.
Yes.
That we just need to take action. That's the first thing. So yeah, I mean, I just like, the fact that we, this scientific approach to revolution, instead of just being like, okay, let's have a revolution and then, have no thinking behind. Obviously, we have to start with a strategy, have a blueprint. But with that blueprint, the idea of the scientific revolution is to be flexible, to be willing basically to fail and learn from, whatever failure we went through. So I love that. And with that, I'd like us to talk about the notion of power. Because you said that, Africa, basically, what is, keeping Africa in the state that it is today is mainly the lack of power.
Yes.
So can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, so definitely when you see from the time that Africa became an entity that could be captured by foreigners to be used in the way that they have used Africa, starting with our ancestors and the way that they are using us today, it all boils down to the question of the powerlessness state of Africa, and the fact that actually they were able to capture Africa is because we were powerless. And this is actually, if you can go back as far as the ancient Egypt, you will see that at some point the pharaohs, most particularly, I think Akhenaten, began to prioritize philosophy and mostly religion, and giving the security of Egypt to foreigners such as Greeks, mercenaries, to come and protect and defend and police the country. And this is exactly how those enemies studied and understood and found the ways by which they could defeat Egypt. And since then, we have never been able to rise again. Since that moment, we have been down because we handed over the power of security to the foreigners, to Greek mercenaries. And it has been the case up until now. The main problem of Africa can be seen through hunger, malnutrition, corruption, bad leadership, so forth and so on. But it comes down to the point of powerlessness, because the world in which we are living today is mainly defined by power balance, or in other words, is mainly defined by those who have the power, and those who do not have the power find themselves victims of those who have the power. And that's where I thought this revolution, or the liberation that we are talking about, in other words, this revolution pursues the objective of liberation. And that liberation can be seen, can be measured in the context of how Africa is becoming powerful, in a way of seeing Africa taking charge of its resources. Because as we're speaking right now, the gold of Congo, the gold of Ghana, the cocoa of Ivory Coast or Nigeria, the oil of Angola, all these things are valued not by Africans, but by foreigners who actually need those things. So it's like me coming to you, wanting to have your phone, but I'm the ones who have to fix the price or the value of your phone. So that means I can almost take it for free. And this is what is happening right now. So, and that is possible simply because Africa does not have the power to control, to manage, and to define its own reality. And because we don't have that power, it's people who have the power who define the reality that we have to live in. And that reality, we call it today neo-colonialism. So the liberation must be looked or defined in the context of how much power we gain from the activities that we are doing as African people throughout this year 2025. What are the activities that the pan-Africanist organization or the global pan-Africanism has done, and how much power have we gained out of those activities? That's how we are able to measure the liberation of Africa. So power is very important for for African people, because power itself is actually, as I said, the measurement of liberation. Even at the individual level, you have the power because you are a person who acts with the free will. That means you are free to decide today that you are going to spend your evening, for example, in Paris, since you are in London, and you have the power, and that power can be in terms of money. You spend the money, you apply, you spend the money, and you realize your choice or your decision. The next morning, you decide to have a certain type of dinner, and you do that. You want to send your kids to a particular school to follow a particular education, and you do that without certain constraints. Why? Because you have the power. That power gives you the freedom to act in a way that fits your imagination and your wishes. However, this individual power is always limited because it allows us to choose the options. But the point is, the options that we are choosing are always the options that have been set up by other people. And the question is, who are those people who set up those options for us to choose? If you think that to be a middle class person, I need to drive this type of a car, that is an option that you are choosing, the type of a car. So the question is, who has defined what has to be a middle class? Who has defined that reality of a middle class person? The car they have to drive, the house they have to live, the lifestyle which they have to live. Those are the domain of collective power now, because a collective power gives you not the freedom to choose, but that gives you the liberation or the freedom to set up options so that the people or individuals can choose from. So I think as we are pursuing liberation of Africa, which we have in the context of this book explained as being the power, because liberation means power. If you want to be liberated, it means to do things by yourself. You need to have the power to do things by yourself. So this liberation has to be seen in the context of collective intelligence, collective actions, collective blueprint, because when people come together, they create the power of defining options, not only to choosing. Today, we say that, okay, South Africa is is a powerful country on the continent. Nigeria is a powerful country, powerful economy. Why? Because we are only there to choose options, but we don't create options that other people have to choose. So this is the limit of the power that Africa has today. It's only being given privilege to choose. Even at the individual level, you get the money. The only thing that you can do is to choose the best car for yourself, the best house, the best education. But can you really define that education? Can you define what type of lifestyle people have to live in that particular country? You see, when you look at what happened in the United States recently, the conflict between Elon Musk and Donald Trump, you will then realize the limits of money and the potential of power. Right here, we have a guy, Donald Trump, who has been trusted with the collective power of the people in America through the elections. And you have the guy who has got the limited power of money. He can buy anything that he wants to buy. But the point is, when when things went south between them, he had to step back, because he could have faced a lot of challenges. He could have been expelled from the US, and that can be possible. Donald Trump can expel him from the US, can excommunicate him from the US, can take off his passport, can sanction his company. All those things can show us how limited individual power can be. And this is to say that in Africa, mostly we running after money. We think that if we can become millionaires, the problems of Africa is over. But that is not true. I think the power that we need in the context of this book, this power that we are talking about, is a collective power. Is when we are able to come together. That's why we talk about unity, right? Come together around objectives and work together on those objectives and achieve them. We have then created power that will allow us to define our own options. As Kwame Ture said it, every people who aspire to be free, to be powerful, must enjoy the ability to define their own terms and make those terms accepted by other people, right? You have to define for yourself what is democracy and make that definition accepted by other people. Chinese have defined what is called capitalism in the context of China. That's why they call it capitalism with Chinese characteristic. And everyone in the world acknowledges that and accept that this is the capitalism with the Chinese characteristic. So we as African people have to aspire to that level of engagement and activity. Otherwise, we are going to be always sitting down and choosing options that have been set up for us by IMF, World Bank, and those are the options that really impoverish us and exploit us and leave us in the situation in which we are living today. So to finish with the point of power, I think the other dimension that I've discussed in the book about power is that power has to be looked in its current context today. Some times ago in the history, power could be scientific, could be philosophical, could be even spiritual, as at the time of Egypt. But today, in most cases, power can be seen in the context of violence and destruction. That's the reason why the countries that are considered as powerful countries in the world today, they are all possess means of destruction and violence. They can inflict violence on other countries that are not powerful and destroy them. So, in a nutshell, I want to say that if Africa really aims for power, we have to also look into developing those means of violence and destruction, because that's the only language that the enemy understands. Otherwise, we won't be able to succeed.
As you're saying that, it's made me think about an analyst. I think it was a political analyst who was saying about Africa that, Africa basically will be like that until they acquire the nuclear weapon.
Exactly.
And when I heard that, I remember basically my heart, it startled me. I was like, Africa, nuclear weapon. Because, with all the threats basically that we are having right now with countries that have nuclear weapons and threaten to use them basically, I'm like, do we really need more countries to have that? We should be actually aiming to have those people who already have them, destroying them. But having more nuclear weapons, in the world, I don't think that's the solution. I remember thinking like that. And when reading your book and how you explained the idea of power, and then I was like, oh, so actually this is what that guy meant. He meant that, you don't have to use it, but unless you have it, people won't respect you.
True.
People will, other countries won't respect you because they'll feel like, we can go there and we are already more powerful. It's not just about money, but it's also about the fact that we have something that, they can't even think about getting, because we'll do everything in our power to stop them from having it anyway.
Yes.
And when he said that, he was like, yeah, look at Iran, no, he I think mentioned South Korea. No, North Korea, sorry. He was like, North Korea, everybody hates the guy. There's no one basically who likes to do business with them or to, North Korea, basically, they are quite a closed country, in terms of diplomacy and all that. And he said, other countries and other leaders may hate, the president of North Korea, but there's no one basically who will go there and lack respect to, and start doing like, behaving recklessly or saying things. So they go there with respect, because they got power. They have the nuclear weapon. So, with Western leaders, basically, when they go to discuss with North Korea, they know that they have to go with prudence, basically. They cannot just go there and try to impose themselves. They have to go and really, have a discussion and, agree, basically. Both parties have to agree on whatever they are, the arrangements that they are trying to get. But yeah, now that you mentioned that, and, it's just made me think about that guy and my first reaction. And, as sad as it is, that's just the reality. That's just the reality. If you're fighting against someone who has a knife, or, you have a knife and the other person has a rifle, you already lost the fight.
Yes.
Because they can shoot you from distance. They can shoot you from distance. So in fact, in order for us basically to measure our power to other countries, Africa, at least one, and I don't even think that it has to be just like one, like one African country with the nuclear weapon. I think, that's where, it boils down to the unity of the whole continent.
Yes.
When the whole continent can come together with one army, the way you explained it, very well in the book, when we can have like one army, the army of Africa, and one nuclear weapon, the nuclear weapon of Africa.
Yes.
Now Africa will be respected. But unless and until we arrive at that stage, we will always be, the continent that is regarded as, no one cares about Africa, really. The only thing that they care when it comes to Africa, the only thing that they care about is, of course, our minerals. But the people, you can think whatever you want, you can say whatever you want, they don't care, because we are powerless, the way, our brother so beautifully explained it. So thank you for that, brother Kabala. And as we explained about, the idea of power and what, why it's very important. Can you give, because in the book you gave some elements of, ideas on how Africa, we just mentioned one right now, but you gave a few in the book on how Africa basically can develop power. So can you talk about those, please?
Yeah, so I think the book speaks about social revolution, and talking about social revolution is a little bit different from political revolution. Often when we talk about a political revolution, what we see is the overthrow of the government to be replaced by another government, or a leader to be replaced by another leader, so forth and so on. But on the social revolution, it is mostly about overthrowing the system to establish a new system by the people. And the way that I've suggested that we can begin by this is to form organizations at the community levels. You see, we are rushing to lead the world while we are unable to lead our communities. You see, and this is where the reality, the everyday reality of African person happens, is within our communities. But when you look in the continent as we're speaking right now, you will see that there are people coming as far as East Asia to dominate our communities. The other day, I've landed in the southern part of Congo, which is rich in mineral, and I was surprised. I had to question myself if really I have landed in Congo, or I have just by mistake landed in Asia or India or somewhere around there, because there were like 300 Indian people who had just landed with the Ethiopian airline. I was landing with another airline from South Africa, and we were like 10 black people surrounded by 300 Indians, Chinese, all these people, Pakistanis. And the question is, where are they going? When you go around the continent, you will see that they are mostly being implanted, or they establish themselves in the depths of our communities, so that when we wake up in the morning, we have to have our breakfast. We want to go and buy sugar. We don't buy sugar from ourselves, because we are no longer producer of what we want. We're going to buy sugar from an Indian person who at sundown, he takes the bucket full of money, as Malcolm X said it, cross the border with that money, go, in the suburb where he lives. So this is the first thing that we need to overcome, is the management and the leadership and the control of our communities. This is the basis of power. If we are unable to do this, to control our communities, to take charge of our communities, to produce what we consume and to consume what we produce, it means whatever we are pursuing up there, we're not going to be realistic. Yeah, it's not going to be realistic. So this is how I think we need to build the power, is by, firstly, in every community, we have to have organizations, we have to have teams. And this is the reason why I said this book is for aspiring leaders, is to give them the guidelines on how they have to engage their communities, on how they can mobilize people and organize people. Once people are mobilized, the second thing is organization. People have to be organized. It means organized around objectives and goals. And the result of that organization is what we call institutions. So when you look at the world today, you will see that the world is led mostly by institutions. That's why you talk about the institutions of Bretton Woods, which is the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the World Trade Organization, the UN, the World Health Organization. All these are institutions that dictates the direction in which the world has to be moved on. So the challenge, however, is that most of these institutions, if not all of them, were created by Europeans, are governed by Europeans to achieve the goals that Europeans have in mind for themselves, not the goals that Africans have in mind, right? So building the power must happen, as I said, from the community level. We need to mobilize the communities to understand the challenges, the reality of Africa. And the second stage, we need to organize people around the goals and objectives. And those goals and objectives must lead to the building of institutions that firstly must must govern, our communities. And as those institutions grow, they will be able to govern our nations. And as they keep on growing, they will eventually be able to also govern the world. So this is the only way we can build the power, is by building institutions. But it has to begin from community, as I said, from bottom up, a kind of a strategy. They have to begin from the bottom, growing up. They have to be able to transform first their lives at the community level, creating jobs at the community level. Because look, we are pursuing long-term goals, but every day people need to eat, people need jobs, people need sugar, people need bread, and we cannot leave all these essential things in the hands of foreigners. We need to be able to provide this for us. And as we are building these small institutions at the local level to take care of these things, those institutions will grow to become national institutions and finally international institutions. So that is how I think we are able to build the power. And there always been a question of money. Then when you speak like this and people ask, well, we don't have money to do this, we need money to do ABCD. But the point is, what has kept us alive all these years? We are 40 years old, we don't have money still. We are 50 years old, we don't have money. So how are we able to live to be at our age without money? Certainly there is something that we have, that we possess, that has been keeping us alive. And that is the very same thing that we have to use differently in order to create collective power. Because the meager means we have, the more, I can say, the more scarce resources we have, the more individual we want to be. But we don't even realize that most of the powerful institutions in the world are all working together. All the banks are working together in a system, common system. That's the reason why if you are being sanctioned by one bank, you almost get sanctioned by all the banks. We have a case of Nathalie Yamba, one of our revolutionary queens, who got sanctioned by European Union, and automatically all banks, PayPal, all accounts, YouTube, Netflix, all these things shut down for her. It was like once, wake up in the morning in the black hole, right? So this is how these things are connected. But we, the poor, the powerless, we want to be individual. We want individual power. We want to individual gain. We want to win individually. I think this is one of the points that the book insists on, to build collective power, build collective agenda, because that is the means and the way through which we are able to transform local struggles into international struggles. The unity will be able to allow us to bring personal challenges into collective challenges, that we are able to bring more people around to work and solve, and then and then see ourselves, prospering and progressing towards the bigger picture that we have, which is the liberation and emancipation of Africa.
Yeah, my brother. Everything that you said, and once again, you guys need to get the book, because this discussion is beautiful. I'm sure that you get all the wisdom that is coming from our brother Kabala, but unless you read the book, it will you won't get the full picture of what we are talking about here. So please get the book. I'm going to put all the information that you need in the description box, so make sure to go there. Let's support each other, because we are talking about community. And this is exactly it. If someone like our brother, once again, is doing something amazing, he's not doing it for himself. He's doing it to serve, Africans, to serve Africa, because he has ideas that, if implemented, can get Africa out of that hole that we are in today. And so we have to support one another. That's the beginning of community. Because unless we work together, if I do something and no one else but me cares about it, there's no sense of community. And like he said, without community we can't move forward. Together we are strong, and isolated we can be crushed in seconds. So let's understand that and try to, support one another. And also what you were saying earlier about the fact that, we don't have institutions. We just copy or we just follow. I think that's the downfall of Africa. And we have to, once we have understood that, and I think a lot of people have understood that, the way you said it beautifully, all those organizations, when they come to Africa, they're not coming to help, They say, oh, it's for charity. We are coming to help. We are coming to develop. But obviously, they have their own agenda. And no other continent would like to see Africa develop, to be honest. We already highlighted it, with the Lagos meeting, and then the Washington one to, to counteract and make sure that whatever benefits African nations were going to get from that meeting don't happen, because they need us poor. They just need us poor. If you see that Africa, is at the same level at them, as them, they won't be able to do all those bad things that they've been doing, stealing our resources, killing our people, etc. So, we need to understand that community, like our brother, just said, is key. Community is key. And regarding the Indians, you said that you arrived at the airport, and you were basically shocked by all those, straight like people who come to Africa, to the Congo, and they are not from African descent. The problem is, I think our generation needs to wake up, because those people, when they come, they're not just coming as tourists. They are coming there for business.
Yes.
And most of them are buying lands. They are buying lands. Today, we have, people like, African people living in the UK, and I mean, all over the West, basically, and all over the world, I can say. And we rarely think about, buying lands. You don't have to go and live there, but at least secure lands, because at some point, when we will wake up and be like, okay, I need to go to Africa to go and, and acquire a land and buy a land. When we go there, we will realize that actually all those lands, all the good lands at least, have been already bought, by Indians, by Chinese, etc. So we are going to become strangers in our in our own continent. So it's very, very important, and I love the fact that you highlighted that. We need to understand that, while we are sleeping, the other nations, are going. They see basically what we don't see. They see the opportunities. They have the vision of what may happen in the future. When the children of Africa eventually open their eyes, they will try to go and buy land. So now those nations, those people come and buy the land, So, it's high time that we woke up to that. So, my brother, one of the things that I really, really liked about the book is the fact that, after each chapter, you have, practical tasks, that people basically can go through, in order to implement the ideas that you are developing. So can you tell us the idea, like why did you come up with that, and how shall we use the exercises and tasks that you suggested?
Yeah, beautiful. I mean, the main idea was not just to write a book that will entertain people, but it was mostly to get people engaged with the book, because it is one of the ways that people get to challenge themselves and challenge their belief and assess themselves where they are positioned with regard to this agenda of African liberation. For example, one question that I think everyone, one task actually, that I think everyone will come across and find interesting is the question about, can you survive without Western 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 goods? Can you survive with, for, let's say, for one day without consuming Western products, starting from your internet, the food, the clothes, anything that you have in your house, which is Western made, right? Can you survive one day without that? So I think just the question, but there are a lot of taxes that are, that I've put on the book. The point is just to get people engaged. After you have read a chapter, it takes you through those taxes, those tasks. Sorry, kind of getting you back on the chapter to evaluate your understanding of it. So it is really designed to get people uh, oriented towards how can we properly do this revolution. As I said, it's a guide. A guide. It's really a guide, and I thought at the best of my ability that those tasks or tests can maybe help people to really get to understand better the book. If you have read something and didn't understand it, you get to the point of those assignments and you have to go back and read again, so that at the end of it, we are all able to come up with something, right, after our readings. And the vision was actually to get it to high school students in different institutions, to give them and to get them engaged, and then uh, within a couple of years we can have a new generation of people who are properly trained for the leadership responsibility that we all know that Africa requires right now, because the current leaders that we have today are manufactured Western products that cannot solve African problems. So we have the responsibility to create our own leaders, and I've just done my contribution.
I agree with you. I agree with you. We have to come up with African solutions. I love that. And we were earlier talking about the IMF and institutions like that. I don't know why as Africans we just feel like we have to follow them or adopt them, the institutions or the organizations that have been, created to enslave us even more. I'm thinking about a simple concept that is purely African. I know that other people like from other countries also may do that. But can you imagine? I'm talking about Likelemba. I know that in Congo, you guys call that Likelemba. Cote d'Ivoire, I think they say tontine. So something like that, instead of going and borrowing money from the IMF, if there was, because those African leaders keep coming together for meetings, I have no idea what they're discussing there, because you don't see any results. Things are still stagnant. Nothing is moving, but they keep having those meetings, those useless meetings. Likelemba. If, for instance, can you imagine having all the African nations, even if, because that can be the beginning of the unity, they agree, okay, every month we put in, it can be something as small as $50,000 or $10,000 each nation in Africa. We put that together and we give it to a country that has presented projects that we feel that actually they are, going to help develop that nation. And then the next month we give to another and we turn like that. I think that's a purely African notion.
Yes.
That's Likelemba is purely African. And you are seeing people building huge houses in Africa. People who don't have much, they are working in Europe as, cleaners. But in Africa, they have villas and mansions because of that. They participate in that, basically cotization. Every month, one person takes a certain amount, and then the next month, another person takes. If we can do that on a continental level, can you imagine the results?
Beautiful.
And that's African. But anything that is ours, we tend to neglect and not see the value, in that. When it's the opposite for other nations, the Western, whatever they developed, even if it's shit, for them, they will, value it as if it was, the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
So I think it's high time that we see what we have and we start working with what we have.
Yes.
because it's a shame that we have all those things. Like I said, Likelemba. It doesn't even require straight away for all of the nations of Africa to be united. All it takes is to go in those meetings, those useless meetings discussing, useless things that we never see. Go there. One of the leaders comes up with that idea. Instead of borrowing money from the IMF, let's have that to reduce our debts. That's the beginning of something. But no, instead of that, every year you will hear them going there and beg for more money. Anyway, my brother, this was a beautiful, read for me. When I read the book, I didn't, have lots of time because that I'm working on my own book.
Yeah.
But I started the because I was reading, chapter by chapter every day. I will read a chapter and then go through the the exercises, because I didn't want to, for me, it's really unique. It's really unique, this concept of not only just saying, oh, we can do this and that, because we find lots of empty strategies. Basically, okay, I'm going to share a strategy, but when you read the strategy, you don't understand anything that the person is talking about. But this book, when you read the chapter, first of all, it's very simple and action oriented. So when you read the chapter and then you go to the to the task that's that Kabala is suggesting, when you go through the tasks, you basically get new ideas. And I think that's the beauty of it. You get new ideas that you may not have thought about. That, at least that's what happened. That was my experience. And I'm sure that if you actually play the game and do this, I think at the end of it, you'll become a real pan-Africanist, not just one of those, oh, I'm a pan-Africanist, what do you do for Africa? Not much. You see? And like you said, we basically, we don't own anything. Even our bread, we have to go buy it from the Indian shop, from a shop which is not like, the people who are benefiting from, us investing, like us going every day to buy the bread, are not even African.
Yes. Yes.
So it's really a shame. It's really a shame. So we have to act, and this book is packed with actions, very small actions that may seem like nothing, but when every single one of us are doing them, we will make a difference. They will feel that. They will feel that something has shifted. How come we're not, making the billions that we used to make out of that the Black community? They will feel it, So it's very important, guys, for you to read the book and then go through, every action that he suggested, and you feel that, oh, I can actually do this. It's not about boycotting. It's a boycott, but a silent one. We don't have to say, okay, we're going to boycott this organization or this. There's something here, an organization, something very organized that we can use to move forward. So please have a look at the book, buy it to support our brother. Let's be a real community, because a community starts with supporting one another. And for me, I don't even see this as supporting one another. I see this as, understanding the challenge that we all are going through as Africans and wanting to find solutions. The solutions, part of the solutions have been, suggested in this book. So have a look, read the book. Once again, I will put the link, all the information regarding how you can get the book. I'll put those in the description box below. So make sure to buy the book and once again, support our brother. So Kabala, is there anything you'd like to add before we close today?
Now, I want to thank you, Queen, for the time that you took for us to delve into the analysis or summary of the book. I think we have gone through some important sections, and other sections, because of time, we couldn't cover all of them. And
You know what?
yeah.
You know what? I don't want to cut you, but I wanted to suggest that we basically have two sessions, like part one,
Mhm.
to make sure that we go in depth. But I really think that even we can stay here talking about the book, but unless you read it and go through the experience,
Yeah.
I don't think that you will really understand. Even if we have like 100 sessions, so that's why I was like, okay, let's just do the best we can with this session, and then for the rest, the readers, like the people who will go ahead and buy the book, will discover for themselves.
No, great, great. No, I thank you for that, and I thank all the listeners, and I hope that this book opens the mind of some Africans, if not all, so that they can begin a journey on which we all going to meet, and where we are going is a land that our ancestors had in mind when they were fighting, when women in Nigeria, for example, were downing themselves with their babies because they didn't want to be captured as slaves. They had one thing in mind, is that they're free people and their children had to live a dignified life. When our ancestors in Haiti were fighting, Toussaint Louverture, Dessalines, and others, they were fighting for an ideal which was in the mind, which is that black people are entitled to a dignified and free life. The people in America who were fighting, so forth and so on the continent, Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, all these people had an ideal in the mind, and that ideal was that African child must live in the world where he is respected, he's treated with dignity, and he is actually the beneficiary of what his land produces. So that is where we are going. Once we meet together on that journey, it means we are going towards the complete liberation and emancipation of Africa. I mean, it doesn't matter what you do. You don't have to be into politics. You can be a business owner. You can be an artist. You can be a musician. But the key point is, how do we transform our skills, our expertise into becoming the tools that can help us to liberate Africa, so that tomorrow we don't hand over Africa, which is at the knees, right in front of Europeans, to our kids, but we hand over to our kids Africa that is truly free and emancipated, so that our kids should not swim across the Mediterranean water to go to the Babylon, but they should have their dreams located on the continent, and they must pursue those dreams on the continent and achieve them and make Africa great again as once it was in the past. So I thank you, Queen, for your time and for the opportunity. I was privileged to be discussing my book with you today, and I look forward for more engagements. As long as the divine keeps on inspiring us, we will be there to produce or to provide, or to, of course, to bring forth some wonderful things that can empower our community, so that we have Africa of our dream.
Beautiful. I think that's a beautiful way to end this session. So let me just remind you the title of the book. So the book is entitled "Only Revolutionaries Should Read This. Others Will Be Confused." That's the title of the book that we discussed today with Kabala. So once again, the information will be in the book, in the description box below. And I hope that you enjoyed this episode today. If you did, please like, subscribe, and share with whoever you feel that will be interested in this episode today. So with that, thank you, Kabala. And we shall see you in the next episode of the Self Upgrade podcast.